Welcome in, everyone. This is our flow recap for 10/3/2025 to 10/10/25. As always, we're going to look at the full move of the flow. We're going to look at the raw flow feed. We're going to kind of look at what stuck out. We got some losers. We got some winners. But we have a lot of great winners this week, a lot of high percentage wins. And if you're new to the flow recaps, how I do this is anything less than 10%, a 10% move I consider a loss. I look for at least minimum 10-15% for a return. Anything under that I consider a loss here. And I'm looking at the max return for the contracts as well. So you're going to see from that whale entry to the max contract and some of the whales exit for losses. So this is a good lesson on adjusting up stops as well. And again, if you're new, I do post everything live time. I don't edit my posts or anything, so everything's posted real time. All of that here. So let's get started here. So we're going to cover last Friday's, and again, if you're new, I recap the previous Friday into the next week just because sometimes that flow doesn't make a move that same day. So we're going to start out with silver. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these just because they were covered last week as well. Silver, this was your entry last week, 383K on those. These hit a high of 165 here on the 9th. So those did end up hitting 36.36%. Good move on those. And it looks like majority of that volume is probably still in here too. Could have seen some come off a little bit. Actually, it looks like they probably added yesterday. A lot of that volume carried over, so they could be adds at the bid yesterday, but good move on those, 36.36%. Next up, we're going to go with the ABBV 1024-245 call. And this one, interesting one here. Here was our original whale entry here, 668 contracts. Had about 750 come in here on the 8th. And they didn't close these out, so misconception here that all bid side flow is an exit. Because when we look at the 8th, you look at the 9th here, all of that actually carried over. So it looks like they may have added to the position here. All of that volume's still in. Still got a couple of weeks on those, but those contracts from the original entry, they would be down 81%. So again, do what you want with some of this information. None of it's financial advice, but this would be a good discounted entry. So that whale, that would be a loss there. So a lot of our losses are coming from last Friday's flow. So the SNDKs, this one's another loss. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this again either. Again, whale entry here, came in here, popped a little bit here on the 6th, and then kind of chopped, and then down a little bit here. Little time on those still. Whales still in those. Down about 44%, if that. And something I like to tell people too, just because a whale's still in doesn't mean you have to be in. Should always obviously be adjusting up stops if there's profits and managing your risk properly. So the SNDKs, that's down. And another one coming up is the XLF 12/19/56 calls. Again, a lot of time on these still. Contracts, that whale's still in, obviously. A lot of that open interest is still there. Contracts closed at about 52 today, so that whale's down 44%. Again, we have bank earnings coming up next week, so keep that in mind as well. 69 days left on those. But those, again, down 44% currently. And up next, the 1017 QBTS 31 puts. These ones, again, here's your whale entry, 1.6 million. Still a week on these, and they kind of popped back here. Yes, actually on Wednesday here, came about 206, but then down again, and they're trading about 142-ish here. So that, again, whale down 44%. A lot of red in the market today. So on to the next. So we finally, so SPY puts from last Friday again. This was our original entry. We had about 2 million here in puts. 93, 94 was the average here. Obviously, kind of choppy throughout here the next day. came up here, almost break even, and then today was the big, massive drop here. I mean, hitting a high of 291, so that's 209.57 max return on those. And again, if it's the max return, that doesn't mean you're going to probably exit at that, but these did close near the high here. So great move on those, and looks like probably a lot of volume here today, so I have to kind of see what carries over and all that, but great move on those if you held through those. So up next, and for those in Stock Hub, we have a couple flow and charts plays. I'm not going to kind of touch on those in the video because a couple of them are still open. I want to keep that private. We did have SPY puts that we opened last week on 9/24/25. We opened a position on the 130.26 620 puts at average of 11.10, and they hit 13.18 today, so 18% on those. And I can let everybody know that just because I told everybody I was going to take my profits today. So good move on those. Those made a move there. So up next, and I apologize if you hear the dog slurping behind me. He got fixed over the weekend. I can't really let him run around, so he's very close to me. So, okay, on to this week. So the APP 10-10-690 calls. So this one, we're going to pop this back to the 6th here and look, because this whale actually exited that same day. So you see a lot of that volume here, 10:01. That whale got out here about 9:60-ish. That whale took a very small 4% loss on those, and obviously a little other bid side candles here, but came down 10:01, came back up. They hit 10.50 on the day. So they only really hit about 5% there. Again, under 10%, I consider it a loss. Obviously, that whale cutting there. So loss on those of 4% here. So SPY puts, these made a great move here. We're going to pop this back. So here was our SPY flow here. And again, 39. You can see we kind of grinded down a little bit for that day, but then they popped here that next day, hitting a high of 58. So good move on those. Looks like a lot of bid side action here today. And this is why you should always be adjusting up stops and being smart and trade on your own, because that 39 to that high of 58 here on Wednesday, that actually was 48.72% return. So you should be taking some profits or have a stop on, especially knowing that those contracts were short dated. So now when we look at that flow here, let's pop this down. And if you're new to the videos, you'll always kind of notice my flow is pretty textbook here. So you'll see that IV increasing, that spot increasing, and that flow coming in at the ask. I'm probably not going to be able to go back because these are expired. So you can see we're at 1848 here. It's going to probably mess up here when I come back. Yep, let me just adjust this here. So when we look at that raw flow feed, again, you just see that IV coming in here. That spot coming in at the ask looks good all the way up. I don't see any changes there at all. So that flow looked good to me there. And again, running from that 39 here entry to 58 for a high there, 48.72%. And let's see. So next up, we have the 1031 MDT 102 calls. So this one, I'm going to pop this actually to the 7th, and we're going to look at a 2-day view, because this flow came in here at close, about a second before close. And let's see, pop the results out. And again, you see how that IV spikes when that flow comes in. You're coming in at the ask on a wider bid ask spread. Spot is just your fill price. Making sure all the time is all correct here. And you can see that IV just stays up here. Looks good. And these actually popped that next day, so 98. These actually opened up at 115 here. So they opened up at a nice 18.56%, came down here, and you would have had enough time to at least get a stop on here. And kind of looking at the flow now, popping this out to Friday, this whale is still in with a good amount of time on there, 20 days, trading at 24 now, so you could get a discounted entry on something like that. But just kind of looking at that volume and open interest, no big changes, so our whale is still in. So good move on those. Up next, the 1114 SMCI 65 call. And I apologize, my allergies have been killing me, so excuse the little coughs every once in a while. Here's our flow. You can see big chunk of that carrying over here. That original whale, 950 contracts. Whales in there. And we kind of dropped that same day a little bit, and then we ended up running into the next day and kind of topping out here for a couple days here, hitting a high of 425 here on the 9th. So good 18.06% on those. And again, just kind of looking at that raw flow feed. You just see how that IV spikes when that flow comes in. Spots coming in at the ask, good sign there. And our flow made a good move there. Really good move on those, and looks like maybe a big chunk of this is still in here. Just have to see what happens. And obviously some time on them as well too. But again, 360 to that high of 425, kind of chopped about that 420-ish for a day or so. So up next we have, let's see, the shop 1010 172 5 calls. This one was another loss on the week. You can see here, whale came in here and looks like they got out that same day because you don't see a lot of that volume carry over into the next day. Okay, sorry, I had to step out there, so if I start again in the incorrect spot, apologies. Dog was going crazy. So back to the 7th here. So we're going to pop this back. We're going to pop this one more time. So 7th here. Looks like our whale, actually we're going to go check on that exact days, sorry. This one's going to be a little messed up. So this one just kind of slowly grinding down, and when we look at the 7th here, not a big chunk of that carried over, so telling me that whale probably passed the contracts off to somebody else, and or they took some for a loss. So our big chunk here is at 66, so we're going to say a 61.85% loss. And again, with the losses, that does not mean you need to take that big of a loss. My stops are a lot smaller than that. So up next, the Mara 1031.18 puts. Big move on these ones here. 80, they actually ran that same day to 106, kind of tailed off towards the end of the day. Choppy the last couple days here, and then your big move today up to a high of 152, so 90% on those. And look at that raw flow feed as well. So it's not going to be the best recap this week just because somebody is very obnoxious and he's not supposed to be jumping, and he likes to jump on my legs. So your flow here, so 8603, see where that big chunk comes in here, and we're gonna look at the page before that. The flow's a little old, so I can't pull that back. I think it was a block trade anyways. Give this another look. So yeah, most of that came in here at that 90501, and I can't get back to that first page. Believe there was a little flow there. Sometimes contracts, when they're back so far, they just don't always load. So but yeah, your big flow there coming in at the ask. Good move on those, and these may or may not be ads today. Would have to check that open interest on Monday, but nonetheless, good move on those. So that high from 80 up to 152 there, giving us a 90% gain. And SPY puts, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the SPY puts. Obviously, good move on those. This one shorter dated, obviously, coming in here, 35. Just choppy for a couple days here. Just see it chop in there, and whale staying in there. You see all that volume in there, and then we're almost zero today, and obviously with them expiring today, that was theta. It just eats them away. But again, we're looking at the full move here. Yeah, these hitting, and even from that, 35. If you're coming here, you hit. We didn't hit 123 here on the 7th. Oh no, that was the day before. I was like, we didn't do that. You hit 56 here on, I think 56 was the open. Yeah, okay, that was towards open. You hit 37 here that next day, and you're in at 35. You're probably gonna take some off the table. And there's going to be a lot of volume today. Obviously, a SPY 0 day is going to see a lot of volume. But the max return from these, if you would have held them from the entry to expiry, which I know some people do, 617 there. So that would have been a 1,662.86% gain. And again, that whale looks like majority of that stayed in here. And even looking at the 9th, see a lot of that volume here. Probably passed off some because you don't see a big change in that open interest there. How much was that first one? 19,000. Actually, this whale might have got out at 28.25. 28.25. Let's see. 8th, so into the 9th. Then we had all that volume. So yeah, that whale looks like they got out here on the 9th actually, because you see all that volume. No change in the open interest today. So whale getting out about 33, 28, 25, 32. Missed a big move though. So okay. On to the next, the Oklo 1017 160 calls. Massive move on these. Kind of choppy that same day, popped that next day, dropped yesterday, and then your high today of 1314, 364.31% on those. And again, just looking at that raw flow. This one's a good example. You see that IV spike here. Spot price is at the 283. You see that. For some reason, I thought that said 22 down there. You just see that spike. And looking at the time here as well, 235. Very, very similar timing. Whale may be related, hard to tell. But your IV rose, spot coming in at the ask, and again, wider bid ask. And obviously, good move. We looked at that. So 364.31% max return on those. USAR, these good move on these. We got in here actually at 260. I have 260s there fill. Saw these first two candles. Just wanted to check that open interest, and then you get that big candle come in here. You know it's definitely an opening trade then. And when we would look at this flow as well. So just keep an eye on that IV 163.14. Again, spot coming at the ask. 163.14. So okay, let's see if we can remove that time filter and take a peek. A little bit. Sometimes looking back at that historical flow gets a little tricky, but good move on those. Obviously, 814 for a high, 213.8% on those. RCAT. This is a good example of. You should always take profits or have a stop on no matter what. Entry here, 115. Scrolling down here. So that IV does drop a little bit here. But you're coming at the ask on a wider bid-ask spread. So that looks good after the fact, but when we looked at it at the time, combining that with the net premiums here, obviously big spike in net call premiums here. That's another data point that I typically like to use. Looks like that whale got out here probably about 40, but these did make a move 115 up to about 140 there, so a good 21.74% moving. I always have a stop on. Again, like I said, anything under 10% I consider a loss. If I'm up 10%, I should at least be breaking even on the contracts. So I just like to tell people, adjust the stops up. You don't need to follow the whale completely, because if you follow that whale completely, you're going to take the loss. But the whales are pretty good at finding interesting flow, but you still have to manage your own risk. You can't rely on another human exiting. You don't know what their trade is. It could be part of a bigger trade. You just never know. So you got to always manage your own risk and just kind of have a plan going into flow. So up next, the RCAT. Oh, wait, we just looked at RCAT. And this is what happens when you have a dog that got fixed and they're just annoying. This whale exited same day, so we're going to look at that full thing. Here's your flow. 132 was their entry. Big spike in that IV. That spot coming in at the ask here, and this is a bigger bid-ask spread here. And when I'm following whales, I'm not going to always hit that ask. I want to try to get a better fill than the whale, because if you fill here, that spread's going to really kind of mess you up. But this whale, this is kind of why it's unusual. You see that urgency. They want to get in at that ask, that spot price on a lot of volume and everything. And you also look at this too. So this is interesting to me. So when I come here, and that little IV drop here on 2 contracts, not a big deal. Not a big deal. So, little volume attribute, probably just some retail traders coming in there, though. But that flow looked good at the time. A lot of net call premium. Here's your intraday move, 132, all the way up to a high of 335 here. So that's 153.79% intraday gain. You would be taking profits on that, knowing these expired today. I mean, you're moving. This is a good move coming in at 10:10 Central, all the way up to hour-and-a-half trade. And you can see where that whale starts sizing out. A lot of big volume spikes there. And how do we know they sized out? Majority of that volume from 10:9 did not carry over into 10:10. So this is why it is really nice to have unusual whales, which, if you're interested, I have a 10% off code in the description below, as well as my Stock Hub Discord. But it's nice to manage this, because if you don't have this, the only way you can really kind of know there's a thing is if you sell, or if you set an alert in your broker for the contracts to hit over so much. That's the only way. Otherwise, unusual whales, you get that visual, and you can see, I mean, they're big spikes there. So to me, that's telling me, okay, that whale's probably taking some profits. But good move on those, 132 to 335, 153.79%. So FSLR, QQQ puts. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Everybody knows the puts all made a great move. Entry yesterday, 1712, 1716 I have marked. Massive move today. High of 28.40, 65.50% on those. Seeing some no side flow come in here, though. Have to see if they added to that or what on Monday. But again, nonetheless, great trade. This next one, and I took a couple of the next ones, and I never trade MicroStrategy, but this one finally did it. But that flow did look really unusual. You had 18,000 contracts traded yesterday, and majority of those carried over, so you know that volume stuck in. Just kind of looking at the candles, so you can just do a quick eye test as well, but I always scroll over them so I can kind of see it. But I ended up wanting to get in here at that candle here. So I have I think it's 430 marked for this was our entry candle here, because I have 430 marked. So I decided, okay, you have 3,400 contracts, 3,000, so you're at 6,500-ish. You have another 4,000 come in. I want to see if that volume is going to carry over. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more contracts on this second candle, so you know they're probably adding, but this third candle is my confirmation candle, another 2,200 came in here. Then you have another big candle there. Volume all carrying over. Now to me, it looks like they're probably cutting here about 329, so down about 23% when the market started to really dip on the headlines. So a lot of volume there. Have to kind of see what happens there. Something like that, you just kind of can't handle if a headline tanks something. But on to the next, BMNR. So this is a flow from today. I won't spend a lot of time on all of this though. So 322 looks like that whale cut here about 218, so down about 35% there. And I would make a hard assumption they cut. We'll have to double check on Monday, but when we revisit this next week, this was probably cut. Lily here, you have the 880, 1017, 25 calls. Quick move on these, and I think this whale probably exited same day. See how that flow came in here, and we just kind of popped up here and just kind of chopped and slowly came down. You see a lot of these volume candles here. My guess is slowly sizing out here, and then market really starts to kind of downturn and probably getting out here closer to break even and all that. But they did move from that 955 up to 12. That's 25.65%. Again, would probably have a stop on something like that. Would be the smart thing to do. Circle, really good move today, and I'm going to pop us back to this. Spike in the net put premium, put volume coming up. We look at that flow. So come back here. So again, you see how that IV spikes. Pretty big there too, and you got a bigger bid-ask spread. Spot coming in there. And then just coming back to asthma, man. Our weather has been horrendous here the past couple weeks here. It's hot, then it's cold, and then my asthma kills me. But let's see. So yeah, that spot just filling at the ask here that entire time. Smooth move on those all day up. So from that 293 up to 1019, 247.78%. And again, I would not want to swing something like this over the weekend. Yes, we could get down, but you're going to have theta eat these contracts a lot over the weekend, and you're already up 247%. Sure, if you want to leave a couple of runners, I wouldn't leave a full position. But again, have to see what happens. And these are in the money too, so this whale could technically exercise these, and you wouldn't even know until that open interest updates on Monday. But good move on those, 247.78%. Then we had the 1010 PD 125 puts, getting 0-day contracts, just net put premium spiked. And your entry here looks like that whale might have took some here at 152. That whale took them for over 100%. But you just see that massive spike in the IV. This whale massively wanted these contracts. Look at that spread. This is a high conviction trade here for this whale. You are paying pretty much 55 cents over the ask on 0-day puts. This is either a massive hedge or you're going to be very aggressive, and you know the market is starting to fall because this whale got in at that 1015, 1020. So this whale got in after this initial drop in that second pop. That whale had to have known something. And I mean, that you can see where they were right. So big move on those. 60 cents to 213, 255% on the day. So again, I apologize for the coughs in this one and some of the dog jumping on me and kind of mixing up in a couple spots. So next week should be better. Otherwise, yeah, I've got a 10% off Unusual Whales code if you want to try the platform. Really easy to learn, just comes down to a lot of filtering. And Stock Hub, these are where all of our premium alerts are called out. I have certain sections where those alerts are called out, so always please watch the Discord overview video to get a good idea of everything. But otherwise, that's all I got. Have a great weekend, everyone.